So tell us about Trapper because that's an amazing transition. We had this Jupiter wild man here, and you tell it so well. Tell us about Trapper.
Well, I love Trapper, and there's people that live in this community now that actually knew him
Wow.
and have told me stories. And Jim Snyder has written a book about Trapper Nelson, but he was Tarzan before Tarzan. You know, he showed up in the Jupiter Inlet in the post-Depression era of the 30s, and he came down on Henry Flagler's railroad with his brother, and he saw the mullet jumping out of the inlet underneath the railroad tracks, and he grabbed his brother and threw his brother off the train, and then he jumped, screaming, "We'll never go hungry here!" And that began the legend of Trapper Nelson.
Yeah, he came down from like Jersey or something,
Well,
and
Jersey.
he stayed in Jupiter after.
Yeah, he came from Jersey by way of Texas and then made his way to Florida. And he thought he could make a good living trapping here. And they set up camp on the inlet with a third trapper who his brother killed, shot to death, and his brother went to jail for that. And at that time, and this is by recollection, I think there were maybe 90 to 120 people living around the inlet at that time. And Trapper thought it was getting a little crowded. So he decided to go upriver. And with his bare hands and cypress trees and oaks, he created the camp that still exists there that we get to experience when we stop by and visit Trapper.
It's still there.
It's still there.
All the structures, all the hurricanes, it didn't matter.
Yeah, it withstood all of that. Stories are amazing. The boat captains from Palm Beach and Jupiter Island would bring their wealthy clients up to Trappers. And the story goes he would swing by a vine across the river with his loincloth and pith helmet. Dude was 6'4", 280 pounds, like real Tarzan before Tarzan. And he dropped these big black indigo snakes into their boats, and people would be screaming. And that was their first impression of Trapper Nelson as they entered what Trapper called Trapper Nelson Zoo and Gardens. And he would collect an entry fee. He would sell them air plants and trinkets, and they would get to see the animals that he captured. Story goes that he wrestled alligators, and he made a lot of money in this post-Depression area doing that and trapping. And he used that money to buy property, waterfront property throughout Tequesta, at the county courthouse steps as people were losing their properties because they couldn't pay their property taxes. So he amassed a fortune of waterfront real estate.
Wow. What is now like Jonathan Dickinson,
Big
right?
part of Jonathan Dickinson, the islands of Jupiter, Riverbend, North Passage, and other areas like that. And the odd thing about his death in 1967, it was ruled a suicide. They found a shotgun next to his hammock in that thatched hut that's still there, the pole barn. But the guinea hens on the property had picked most of the flesh off his body by the time he was found. But they ruled it a suicide, but there were a lot of people with motives to kill Trapper. So that story and that mystery lives on.
Wow.
His brother, for instance, got out of jail 6 months prior to Trapper's death. And it was because of Trapper's testimony, eyewitness testimony, that his brother was convicted. All the disgruntled property owners that he purchased the property at the courthouse from. And he was supposedly quite a ladies' man. And some of the boat captains would return with one less passenger on occasion. And I think there might have been some jealous husbands out there.
Wow.
So there's
Interesting.
lots of intrigue and stories.
Totally, yeah. That guy's a wild man.
Yeah, the wild man of the Loxahatchee.
Yeah, the wild man of the Loxahatchee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's incredible. I remember reading he would row all the way into like where Love
Du
Street.
Bois Park, Love Street,
and he would row. He would eat dinner
Yeah.
and crush like a whole like key lime pie
Yeah.
or something, and then
Yeah.
go home.
Yeah.
Row home.
but not before tutoring the local kids in math and science.
He was like a math tutor.
He was a smart dude. I mean,
Interesting.
the Wall Street Journal might have been 2 or 3 days old, but he would always read it
Yeah,
and help out the students however he could.
that's amazing. He was way out there,
Yeah.
middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It must have mesmerized all the rich people from Jupiter Island.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, eventually he gave up the rowing because he got a Jeep. He was an MP at Jonathan Dickinson, which was called Camp Murphy during World War II. And he was an MP at Camp Murphy, and somehow he acquisitioned a Jeep, which he kept, and gave up the rowboat for the Jeep. And
Some technology.
the entrance to the camp still exists to this day, but it's gated off and you can't get in there.
Yeah, you go by boat. You go by kayak, right?
We go by kayak, yeah.
Very cool.
Or for people that want to go by kayak to trappers and not go past trappers into the open water where you're exposed to the elements, again, our boats at Love Street will go up to trappers and pick up the kayakers and pick up the kayaks and motor them back to Love Street where they can then have lunch. And
that's a great service because it gets windy once you get past it.
yeah, you're exposed to all the elements then.
Right. Yeah. But it's beautiful on that river, man.
It is. But the best part of the river really is up to trappers.
Yeah.
Because that's where the transition starts to occur with the mangroves and salt water, which you can see as a result of the dead cypress trees. The saltwater intrusion that's killing our river is a result of all the bulkheads and all the development that's going on.
Right. Tell us about that. You were saying that around the river, there's like you're actually not allowed to develop around the river. But what is some of the things causing that? The destruction of the river.
Modern day Jupiter. There used to be a big oyster bar just west of the A1A bridge, the railroad bridge, and they blew the thing up to enhance navigation of that river. And of course, that was one impediment from the salt water that was then gone. And then all the bulkheading, less friction and the rising tides. I mean, we can see it right here in our community as a result of the rising tides. We see more and more dead cypress trees. We've already lost a couple of miles of the river from roughly North Passage up to Trappers Nelson's.
And tell us about, like, you said you're seeing manatees further and further up, but they're looking for food.
They're looking for food. When there's enough water in the river, the manatees will go over the dam structures and come right up to our launch at Riverbend because they can gorge on an abundance of vegetation. Mm-hmm. And it's so wonderful to watch them just nibbling away at the leaves hanging over the riverbanks.
They are special. Manatees are special.
They really are.
Yeah, they're
magical animals.
They're magical.
They don't hurt anybody.
They don't want to mess with you. They want to like hang out almost.
Yeah. They do. Yeah. Very friendly. Even the alligators don't mess with them. Alligators give them a pass.
They give them respect.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder why that is. Do you think, because I've heard more and more that our spraying of our lawns and all those things, the nitrogen's going into the water and murkying up the water so that grass can't grow under there for the manatees.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah?
That's one theory.
Got it.
Now they're coming up with ways to actually feed the manatees. The Indian River Initiative and...
How? That's cool.
They're actually bundling seagrass or some form of grass in these bundles and sinking them in the river. So the manatees can kind of pick through the bundle and get the seagrass. So they're, in nature you learn never to feed wildlife, especially alligators.
Right.
Because we don't want them to associate humans with food. But then here they go, scientists doing it with manatees. So I kind of scratch my head.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.